Okay, so everyone, this is Mary Kate Wheeler. Mary Kate is the Farm Business Management Specialist for the South Central New York Dairy and Field Crops team. She is one of my other colleagues, like Liz this morning. So she is going to talk to you about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's where she and I always, and I know Marianne can concur, that's where she and I are always focusing a lot of our work, because I know I've seen some nightmares, and telling you that going back to Aaron wouldn't like to see nightmarish bookkeeping. So that's Mary Kate. When you are ready, I'm going to let you take it over, but welcome and thanks for coming out and visiting us with us today.
Thank you, Nichole. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and I was really impressed by the presentations this morning. So I felt like they teed up well my topic, right? Both of our speakers talked about the importance of record keeping and your own business in order to set prices and in order to convince lenders that they want to invest in your ideas. So we're going to be talking about what goes into record keeping to achieve the financial success that you're looking for. So a quick outline of what I'd like to talk about. We're going to start with an introduction of what is bookkeeping and how is that different from accounting. Then we're going to get into a little bit of an interactive activity, so that hopefully will wake you guys up a little bit. And we're going to go through some questions to allow you to evaluate where you are right now with your existing record keeping system, if you have one. We'll talk about how to, based on where your starting point is, how do we take you to the next level? And then I'll try to impress you with some of the amazing things you can do if you have good records. So just before I dive in, like Nichole said, I'm the Farm Business Management Specialist for the South Central New York Dairy and Field Crops team. So I work with dairy farms over 6 counties, and I teach QuickBooks. I work with farms one-on-one to get QuickBooks and other record keeping systems set up on the farm. And then I help farms figure out how to get value out of the records that they have. I also do the bookkeeping at home. My husband has a beef and sheep operation. That's his full-time business. And so I get lots of personal and professional experience with doing the books. So it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I feel like folks get into farming or food business because they're maybe passionate about their product or their production system, or they have a really good marketing idea. Few people go into business because they're passionate about record keeping. But my goal, my big picture goal with this presentation today is to convince you that it's something that you should really focus on as a key function of your business, especially if you're just starting out. You've got a chance to get started on the right foot, and to convince you that it's a critical function that you'll get a lot of benefit out of. So to get into differences between bookkeeping and accounting. Bookkeeping, the way I see it, there's really one main goal. So in bookkeeping, we're recording transactions and we're sorting them into categories. So the function of bookkeeping is really about keeping records and sorting them, and essentially it's organizing data. So we need to be bookkeepers so that we can get our data organized. In terms of accounting, accounting is a little bit more advanced function for our business. So there's 3 goals that we need to keep in mind. The first one is accounting allows us to understand the financial performance of our business. So we're taking that data and we're using it, we're applying it to answer questions like, how is our business doing? Are we meeting our financial goals? Are we where we want to be? The second function of accounting looks at our ability to communicate our financial picture to other people. So we can use our financial data to file our income tax returns on time, and we can use it to convince banks or other investors that they want to invest or they want to lend to our business. And then a third function of accounting is analyzing financial information so that we can make better business decisions. We can build budgets, we can plan for the future, and we can make progress towards achieving our business goals. You know, like Liz talked about earlier, this is the function that would help us determine whether we're pricing our products appropriately based on our individual cost structure. So bookkeeping is organizing the data, and accounting is utilizing that data for all of these higher level management functions. All right, so this is a quick quiz. Usually in the in-person room, we can have people shout out the answers, but you can answer to yourself and see if you're right. So I'm gonna show you a bunch of pictures, and I want you to think about, does this picture represent bookkeeping or does this picture represent accounting? And some of these pictures may be familiar to you based on the status of your office. So number one, the pile of receipts or the shoebox full of paperwork. I would actually argue that this is neither bookkeeping nor accounting. We've got a bunch of transaction records here, but we haven't recorded them in any sort of a system, nor have we classified them. So at this point, we are still fairly disorganized. So picture number two, we've got a bunch of folders with paperwork classified into different categories. And this one I would say is not quite bookkeeping, almost, but not quite. So in this example, we're categorizing expenses, but we haven't actually recorded them anywhere. So we can't go and look at a comprehensive record and draw conclusions from that. So this is number three. This is something maybe some of you are familiar with. There's Cornell produces a farm account book, but there's also other, you know, you can go into an office supply store and find like a general business account book. And it's like a paper book with space for you to enter all of your transactions and categorize them with pen and paper. So this represents bookkeeping. So these account books can allow you to record transactions and classify transactions, although it's all done manually. So this is, you know, the simplest possible option for folks to just get a basic bookkeeping system into place. This picture represents a computer program, and I would say this is definitely bookkeeping here. So in this kind of a computer program, we can enter all of our transactions, we can classify transactions, and at this point, we may be starting to do some accounting. This sort of represents a ledger, so the record of the transactions. And then the last picture I have on this slide would be using the data entered into this computer software to generate reports and to start doing analysis for your business. So this final picture here definitely represents accounting. So the next thing we're going to do is go through a little 5-question quiz. And it would be great if you guys could pull out pencil and a piece of scrap paper and actually keep track of your score as we go through the next couple slides, because we're going to get you're going to get a result at the end. And if you wanted to go back to this quiz, it's published as an article on our blog. So there's a link here. You can go back to it in the future if you want to, or share it with somebody else in your business. But to get started, question number 1, I'm going to read the question, and then based on your answer, there's the goal, see the gold circle with your number, that's the question. So question number 1, on my farm or in my business, records of individual income and expense transactions are A, regularly entered into an accounting system before going into organized storage, B, organized, stored in a specific location, easy to find, or C, disorganized, stored in multiple locations, and hard to find. So go ahead and rate your result, and I'll keep moving along. If anyone's confused about this, throw a question in the chat for us. Question number 2 of our record keeping quiz. Which statement best describes the accounting system used to enter and track financial data for your farm or your business? A, we enter transactions into a digital accounting program For example, a program like QuickBooks or Centerpoint. B, we record transactions using a simple accounting tool like the Cornell Farm account book or maybe an Excel spreadsheet. C, we use checking account statements as the primary record of transactions. I like to call this the digital shoebox. Or D, we collect paper receipts and hand them over to an off-farm consultant or accountant at the end of the year. So that's the physical shoebox method. Number 3, who's responsible for recording for your business? A, one person is responsible, and that person sets clear expectations for other team members. B, multiple people share responsibility, and their roles are not clearly defined. Or C, nobody on the farm takes responsibility for financial record keeping. Question number 4, which statement best describes the income tax situation on your farm? A, the farm completes income tax returns on a timely basis. B, we are still working on taxes from last year. Or C, our farm is more than a year behind on filing income taxes. And then our final question for the record keeping quiz, number 5. Our farm generates and uses financial statements to analyze the business. A, regularly on a monthly or quarterly basis. B, regularly on an annual basis. C, only when the bank makes us do it. Or D, not at all. So hopefully you guys, I guess you guys should take a minute now and add up your points for those 5 questions. I just am going to check the chat because I saw something. Ooh, somebody got A for all questions. That's great. And I know, you know, some of you guys are at different stages in the development of your business. So the idea is that these questions allow you to evaluate your own system, but they also provide suggestions for what does it take to achieve best practices in your record keeping. So I'm going to go on to the results. Let's see how you did. So based on your score, you should be able to put yourself into one of these 3 categories. So 15 to 17 points, I would say that you have a rock solid accounting system. And that means that you have reliable numbers to support detailed financial analysis. And based on those numbers, you can plan and make decisions with a lot of confidence. And the only thing to add, you know, in terms of improving your system, once you're at this rock solid level, the way that you can add additional value to your system is to maintain that over time. And as we've heard, you know, it takes several years of financial data to really have a clear picture and a lot of confidence on the progress of a business. So if you're at that green rock solid level, good for you, keep it up. And we'll talk more at the end about what you can actually do with that data. If you're in the 10 to 14 range, you're in the middle. You've got a basic system in place. I would say that it's enough to satisfy the IRS and your banker, and it will certainly help you with decision making. So this is sort of an adequate, but room for improvement. There's probably some things that you could do to make your system more efficient, more effective, and to get more value out of the data that you're recording. So then if we're in the 5 to 9 point range, we can say that your record keeping system is not adequate. So the system is not doing enough to support that basic function of your business. And it may be costly to your business in terms of stress, in terms of extra labor, and in terms of missed opportunities. I'm gonna pause here and just check the chat. Okay, great. And yeah, Nichole made a comment that if you haven't actually started a business yet, you can apply the same kinds of questions to your personal finance. And if you do, you know, going from personal accounting to business accounting can be a really big step for a lot of people, but knowing what your personal finances look like in detail can be incredibly helpful towards deciding when and how you're ready to get into business.
Yes, thanks, Mary Kate. That's a great, great add-on, because some folks, oh, well, we haven't started a business. Yes, but you have to do this for your own personal taxes. So how are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Nichole. And I would suggest too that if you're so if you're interested in going into business, but you might be a year out or 2 years out from launching your business, why not start now and try to up your game with your personal finances in terms of developing a record keeping system that works for you, and to give you a better sense of how you're doing, with your personal finances, right? That can help you understand, well, how much money do I have to contribute into the business to launch it? Those sorts of questions can be really helpful as you're getting started.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mary Kate.
All right, so getting into the question of setting up your system. So this is say you're starting from scratch, or you've got a system in place. It's okay, but you want to think critically about how can we create the best possible record keeping system for the farm. So you can go through this list and ask yourself these sort of 6 questions. Number 1, who's responsible for organizing records and entering transactions? And you definitely see in family businesses that sometimes this responsibility gets booted back and forth to different people. Oftentimes you also see, if you have a business run by a married couple, you might have one spouse that's responsible for production, and you might have another spouse or another family member who's responsible for bookkeeping. And those 2 people have to cooperate and coordinate and communicate so that the person who's incurring the expenses, right, the person who's writing the checks, is getting enough information to the person who's entering those transactions so that they actually understand how to classify them. So the who is really important, identifying the specific roles for different people involved in keeping records for the business. The what question, I like to think about this as, well, what categories are you going to track? We understand that we need to classify things in a certain way for our income tax returns, but there may be other categories that are more important to you in terms of analyzing the performance of your business. So before you start keeping records, before you start tracking revenues and expenses, it's worth taking time to think about how you want to set that up. And in a more advanced accounting course, we would talk about setting up your chart of accounts, right? Which is basically just a list of categories that you'll track for all of your financial transactions. The when is important as well. So record keeping, it requires an investment of time. It requires often an investment of money, and it requires a certain level of commitment and discipline to keep up with it. Record keeping is like chores. If you have livestock on your farm, you've got to go out and you've got to do chores every single day. And it might not be the most exciting or creative time of your day, but it just needs to happen. It's that work that just needs to get done. And record keeping is kind of the same thing. It can be boring, it can be tedious, but it just needs to happen. So thinking about how are you going to allocate time to this task? And if you're not able to allocate time, how can you find somebody else who can? The where, this part is often sort of overlooked, I guess, but it's really important to think about where the records are kept physically in your office in an organized way, depending on who needs to have access to them. And then digitally, it's also important to think about our digital records stored on one computer, and what happens if that computer dies on us? Do we have our digital records backed up and stored in a secure place? So kind of the where question addresses all of those topics. The how, this is the question that I most commonly receive from farmers is, and folks just getting into business, is what's the best accounting system to use? How how should I track these records? And we're going to address that question a little bit in just a moment here in the presentation. I would mention though, if you have been in business for a while and have gotten behind, it may make sense to use a more basic system to get your records caught up and then try to put into place a more advanced or more complicated system going forward to be able to meet your goals and track the different things that you need to track. Okay, and then the why part, this is the part, again, that I'm pretty passionate about, but having a good record keeping system, it gives you peace of mind, it saves you time, and it can empower you to make better decisions for your business. So diving deeper into this question of what accounting system should I use, there's a lot of things out there. Some of them, there are resources and programs that are tailored towards small businesses. There are a smaller number of resources and programs that are very specifically tailored towards farm businesses. Most of the programs that address small business accounting are appropriate for farms, especially smaller farms, although some larger farms and more complicated farm operations may end up leaning towards a program that is very farm specific. So I'm going to just go through a few of the most common things that I see and talk about the pros and the cons, and then we can open it up to hear if other folks have accounting systems that they've used or they've heard about, and see if we can add to the list. So I mentioned this one before, but sort of your most basic system is a paper account book. And you can get some farm account books from your local extension office or through kind of maybe a statewide source here in New York. The pros of this system, it's very inexpensive, very simple, easy to learn, easy to use. It does organize all of your financial data in one place, and you are able to categorize your transactions in the book. The cons, I would argue that these books are less efficient. It may take you the same amount of time to enter data, but it's going to take you a lot more time to get meaningful data out of it, especially if you have to use a calculator to add up all the numbers in one column, right? Versus a computer program that can do all the calculations for you. In this case, you're going to be doing your own calculations. You're going to have a limited ability to analyze the data, and it can be difficult to customize the different categories to match the specifics of what your business needs. So this program can be useful for some folks that have, limited comfort with computerized systems. You can accomplish what you need to do with a book like this, but it can be a kind of an inefficient use of your time and provide less value for your analysis. So the next step up from the paper account book would be using a program like Excel to create an accounting spreadsheet. And there's lots of these available as well. There's some that Extension has constructed over the years that are very farm specific. You can also probably find and download general, small business accounting spreadsheets for free on the internet. So again, the cost is very low. You have having your data stored electronically, and using the formulas in the spreadsheet, you can do a bunch of different calculations. You can, like the account book, you can track your income and expense categories. And then some of these spreadsheets have the ability to generate some of your financial statements for you by drawing data from different pages and summarizing them on a page that you can print out and hand to your lender and say, here's my income statement. Some of the downsides of the accounting spreadsheet option, you do need to be fairly proficient in Excel. Some of the other computer programs are a little bit more user-friendly. The accounting functions, again, the analysis functions are somewhat limited unless you have advanced skills in Excel and you can kind of create them yourself. And so it's hard to use Excel spreadsheets to generate a complete set of financial statements. You can get all the data that you need to generate those statements, but then you're still going to need to construct those statements either by hand or in another document. It can be somewhat difficult to customize as well. And there's limited support for troubleshooting, which comes into play. If you mess up your spreadsheet, you're going to have to figure out how to fix it. So the next level up from a simple spreadsheet is starting to look at an accounting software, accounting programs. And I believe that QuickBooks really is the most common accounting software used by small businesses. And it's very common. I see it all the time in agriculture with smaller farms. The program categorizes income and expense transactions. There's a lot of ability to customize the different categories so that they match up perfectly with the categories that you need to track for your business. There's more advanced functionality too to attract account balances. So your loans, asset values, accounts payable, accounts receivable. There are also optional features to use QuickBooks to do payroll and manage inventory. And then probably one of my favorite things, one of the most valuable things about QuickBooks is you can generate a full set of financial statements. If you're entering your data properly on a regular basis, it's super easy to pull a whole bunch of different reports. And so with a few clicks, QuickBooks can summarize data that you need to answer questions about what's going on in your business. So this can save you tons of time, and it's a very powerful analytical tool. You can also share data with your accountant through QuickBooks, and there's a lot of support online in terms of teaching yourself how to use it. And then the desktop version is a version of QuickBooks software that gets installed on one single computer. And so you can use the software on your computer to open and work on QuickBooks files for multiple companies. So if you, for example, say you want to use QuickBooks for your personal household accounting, and you've got 2 or maybe 3 little businesses, the QuickBooks desktop version you could install once, and you could use it to track separately to track your accounts for each of those different companies. A couple of downsides of QuickBooks, just to keep in mind, this software is not specifically designed for farm businesses. So there may be some things that are hard to do automatically that, in particular, thinking about production data. QuickBooks is not a tool for tracking production data for the most part. It's complex. It may be more difficult for folks to learn compared to setting up a simple Excel spreadsheet. It may have a lot more features than you actually need for your business. There's an upfront cost, usually around $200, maybe up to $300 to install the software. And in this case, with the desktop version, it only gets installed on one computer, at least for that basic purchase price. So it is not easy to access from multiple computers or multiple devices. The other thing is all your data gets stored on your computer as well. So you need to be aware of that and keep track of having backups, figuring out how you're going to back up that data so that you don't lose it if something happens to your machine. And then the fourth accounting system that I will share with you right now is the online version of QuickBooks. So this is very similar to the desktop version in its functionality. However, it differs in that it is a cloud-based accounting platform. So you access it through an internet browser, and all of your data is stored securely on the cloud. That means that you need to have good internet access to use it. But one of the big perks for some people is that you can work from multiple locations and multiple devices. So any time that you're connected to the internet, you can log into your QuickBooks account and check your numbers or enter data, whatever you need to do. One of the other really popular features of the online QuickBooks version is that it can synchronize with your online banking, and that can save you a tremendous amount of time. So by synchronizing QuickBooks with your business checking account or your business credit card account, QuickBooks can automatically bring in all of your transactions that are recorded in those accounts every time you log in. So every time you open it up, QuickBooks communicates digitally with your online banking, brings in all your transactions, and then all you need to do is classify the transactions into the proper category, but you don't need to actually enter that data yourself. And then just a few downsides or cons of this to keep in mind. The online version is based on a monthly subscription model, which can cost more over time. So you might end up spending $200 to $300 a year versus the desktop version where you can spend $200 to $300 up front and use that software over multiple years. Also, if you have more than one company, it would require multiple subscription fees. And there may be some features on the desktop version that are not in the online version, or you might need to pay more to access those features through the online version. And then of course, the top one is that if you do not have good, reliable internet access, this is going to be a very frustrating solution for you. You really have to be connected to the internet reliably in order to use this option. So I'll just pause there and see, those are sort of the 4 most common systems that I see in my work with farms, and they also kind of represent a range of different possibilities for accounting systems. But I want to see if anybody has any other record keeping systems or programs that they've used or they've heard about or that they think that we should know about and consider going forward.
Mary Kate, what is the difference between Quicken and QuickBooks?
Sure. So Quicken is a software program that I believe was originally developed for personal finance bookkeeping. And there is a small business version of Quicken out there. And I don't have a lot of experience with it. I've only had one farm mention using it. My guess is it would be a little bit simpler to use than QuickBooks, but it would also have more limited functionality than QuickBooks. But I'd be happy if any of the other educators want to comment on that.
Actually, comment on that, Mary Kate. Quick was developed by Intuit, just like QuickBooks. So I have had a few farms that were on Quicken, and they've actually migrated all their data over to QuickBooks, and it's pretty easy to do, the 5 version. And you can't get as many of the various financial statements and things like that from Quicken that you can from QuickBooks. So QuickBooks is much more powerful. With the dairy farm, the dairy advancement program that we've been doing, I've been moving a few people from that over.
Thanks, Nichole. Thanks. I hope that helped to answer the question. I will also mention Centerpoint, which is commonly used. Centerpoint is a farm-specific record keeping and accounting program. And I see it used by a number of larger farms, and it's supported by Farm Credit East. So often it's farms that have close relationships with Farm Credit. They may have folks, a Farm Credit bookkeeper or accountant that they work with, and then they may also be working with Farm Credit as a lender. And it has some functionality that's a little bit more tailored towards ag production and asset values, but it is a much pricier option compared to QuickBooks. So from all these options, there's all these options out there. How do you decide what is the best system for you? So this is where it's important to sort of take a step back, and whenever I get this question, because farms come to me and say, well, what's the best system? And the answer is always, it depends. It depends on your goals. It depends on what data you want to track and the purposes for which you are tracking that data. It depends on who is actually going to be keeping your books, what that person's capabilities are, what that person's preferences are, their level of skill and familiarity with computers. You know, for example, I work with some farms and they have ancient computers and very limited internet access. And so not having a good computer setup really limits your options in terms of what systems you might want to use. And then of course there's a question of how much money do you want to spend on bookkeeping? And you know, there's always this trade-off too of should we invest in creating a system that we can manage, that we can operate, versus should we hire it out? Should we do the bookkeeping on our farm? Should we, you know, record and classify transactions, but then hand all that information over to an outside person who can analyze it and who can keep up with the you know, regular financial statements, things like that. So that's a trade-off that you need to think about. And it really depends a lot on who the people are in your business, what their capacity is, and what's the best use of their time. Is their time better used spending several hours a week doing the books, or do they need to be putting that time into other activities? And then the final thing I would say, I have worked with some folks who've gotten really excited about creating like the ultimate record keeping system right from the get-go. And they've sort of ended up creating a system with too many layers of complexity that made it really difficult for them to actually keep up with it. And so my recommendation is pick the right system and then set up like the basic, you know, set it up in the most simple and basic way that gets you the information that you need. You can always add complexity. You can always even say, well, this year we want to track some additional thing because we're trying to answer a specific question. But unless you have a specific question to answer or a specific need for data, you know, adding complexity takes time and effort, and you need to be getting a value out of it. So every layer of complexity you add, you need to be able to justify the time and the effort going into it. And then just to reiterate, I think that oftentimes people overlook some of the costs associated with poor record keeping. And it's because you're not getting a bill from someone if your record keeping is not good, unless that bill comes from the IRS because you're 3 years behind on your taxes. So in that case, you can actually get a bill for not having it in order. But in general, I see the costs of poor record keeping broken down into these three categories. High stress is definitely something you see on farms with poor records because people are having to make decisions with imperfect knowledge, and they know that they are probably not making the optimal decision, but they don't really have any way to figure it out unless they take a time away from important production activities to chase around these transaction records. I see a huge amount of wasted time to come up with a number for somebody's, especially for an outside party like a lender or even a supplier. You can spend a huge amount of time trying to track something down if your system is disorganized. And then number three, which I think is actually the biggest cost of poor record keeping and totally overlooked, is that there are the potential for huge missed opportunities. If you don't know how your business is performing, if you don't understand your cost structure, if you don't understand which areas of your business are more profitable or less profitable, when opportunities for you to improve or to grow or to enter new markets come along, you might have no idea that that's a good move for your business. This also might mean missed opportunities in terms of programs, right? USDA programs, grant programs, folks that I worked with in this past year that had poor record keeping systems were not able to access some of the coronavirus assistance programs that came along. And it was a huge loss for their business. I mean, they missed out on some low interest financing that could have helped them make some really huge improvements on their farm. So there's real costs of not keeping up with your books. And then on the positive side, what can you do with good records? I mean, we've heard a little bit about this already this morning, but good records allow you to understand the current financial position of your business, especially around earnings and profits. Good records allow you to compare your own financial performance with other businesses to understand how are you doing relative to typical businesses in your field. Good records allow you to set goals and to project into the future so that you have some sense of what your targets are and whether or not you're meeting those targets. With good records, you can evaluate specific changes that you want to make, and it can help you to identify the best possible choice out of multiple options. And then planning for the future, whether that is, growing. For many of you guys, it's launching and growing a business. For other people, it might be transitioning or bringing in a new partner. All of those things are very difficult without good records. So the last thing before I turn it back over, I just wanted to pitch that I will be teaching a class, a QuickBooks for Farmers class online in January 2021. The website for my team is up there. We have an events page. It's not actually posted yet, so you can't register yet, but we're in the process of finalizing the details. And it will be a combination of online courses, videos, and live webinars to teach both accounting principles as well as the technical use of QuickBooks Online for record keeping. So that's it. My final message I want to leave you with that, book work is farm work, and it's something that you should, take as much pride in your record keeping system as you do in the products, your production and your marketing work. So thank you guys, and we'll pause now and take questions.
I'm planning on launching my own bookkeeping service, and the area where I'm confused at is I'm not an accountant. I'm a bookkeeper, but I'm not an accountant. And where do I draw that line?
Great question. So just to understand, you're interested in offering bookkeeping services to farms or other businesses, and how do you position yourself based on the fact that you're not certified as a CPA, but what can you bring? And so I guess my answer would be there's a whole range of, like we talked about today, there's this kind of a range, right? With bookkeeping, we've got organizing, classifying, and recording transactions. And then you may be able to, based on the software and programs that you use, you may be able to generate reports and financial statements for the farm. And then based on your level of training and experience, you may or may not be able to interpret some of those numbers for the farm, right? And that would be, I think, what you would want to figure out, how much interpretation could you offer versus just simply providing those reports and those statements. And then, then the farm or the business would be responsible for interpreting those statements. And then they could also go to other outside sources if they needed to bring in a CPA to help them interpret that data.
Right. I feel like I can run the company throughout the year. I can get everything prepared. I can give quarterly statements, but I cannot interpret those statements or make projections for their business. And is that going to limit me on what I can offer the client?
I think that service is a hugely valuable service. I think it's very appropriate to draw the line at that level of interpretation. And then as you move forward, you may sort of discover more about what the needs are of different businesses, and maybe you would pursue that, if that seemed like a way that you could add a lot of value for your customers. But I think that just what you're describing would add a tremendous amount of value for many businesses, even without that added layer of interpretation. And that added layer of interpretation comes with a little bit added liability too, right? If you're advising businesses on what to do, you may charge more for that service, but you may also have a little bit more liability. There's more risk that if something you advise them to do doesn't work out, how does that affect your relationship?
Great, thank you very much. You gave me a lot of direction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the best way to do that, to go about doing that? So I'm an okay record keeper, but I focus more on my business than actually keeping records. And like in theory, every Friday, I want to sit down, I'm going to do paperwork, and I don't actually do that. So how does anybody else, like I don't print all my receipts. How do I go about starting from here forward, doing really well, but also catching up on the other stuff? I use Excel, which I think is part of my problem, is I don't find it to do as much as what I want it to do, but it's free. And so I think I feel uninspired by it, but I have to get over that. So I just kind of wonder, where do you go from there?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. And there was kind of a somewhat related question in the chat, but I might address that separately. So first thing I would say is that lots of people are in that position where if they have to choose between working on production stuff or bookkeeping, the production stuff is always going to get prioritized because the bookkeeping always can kind of get pushed down the line. So one thing I would think about for a person like you, I guess there's two different ways to think about it. One is you can separate those roles in your business, right? You could find another person who you could pay or bribe or trade or whatever you need to do to like get that person to come in and spend 2, 3, 4 hours a week entering your transactions so that you could focus on other things. So you can separate the jobs, and then that person becomes really a specialist, or should be a specialist in that role. So they should be fairly good at it, efficient. It should take them less time. They should be able to add more value. So that's like one option. The other option is saying, no, it's important to me. I have this ability and I want to be the person that does the books. I want to understand it, know what's going on in there. If you're in that position, then I would recommend to people to figure out the most efficient, the most labor-saving system that you can find. Even if it costs more money, you can weigh that with, I might have to pay a little bit more, but it's going to save me hours over the course of a year. And I'm actually going to be able to achieve the goal of completing the task on a timely basis. I would encourage folks in your position to look at the online version of QuickBooks because it has this ability to synchronize with your bank. Every time you open it up, it's going to have a list of transactions for you to look at. And so that becomes your to-do list. And you can tell, if you're like, okay, if I wait 2 weeks, if I don't do it every week, I do it every 2 weeks, my list is going to be longer. But every time I go in, if I go through everything on that list, that's you can feel sort of like done, right? You have a defined task. And it saves a ton of time because you're not entering each transaction. In fact, depending on your online banking system, you can actually create rules in QuickBooks and sort of train QuickBooks Online to classify transactions that it recognizes to even further reduce your time, your workload.
Thank you. I think I want to keep control of it at this point. I want to feel kind of inspired and like I want to know how my business is doing. But I also, I focus so much on doing it. And so this is good. Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add, if you were gonna switch over from Excel to QuickBooks, you might want to find a person like one of your extension agents or somebody that could help you set up the new system. And then because it can link with your bank account, you might have a year's worth of transactions that you can access through your online banking that you can just pull right into QuickBooks. And again, that can save a tremendous amount of time because it can, save you from having to enter every single, transaction on your bank statement or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question in the chat box, advice for seasonal growers, keeping up. It gets so intense by August. That is a really hard question to answer. And that is a real issue for folks. So again, I would sort of say similarly, you might just decide that you're going to put off your bookkeeping for so many months. If in the summer you've got like 4 months of craziness, especially in the spring, maybe, you know, you can decide how frequently you enter records. Some people might do it on a weekly basis when things are fresh in their mind. Some people might do it once a month. When you get your bank statements from the bank, you're going to go in and that's when you're going to update everything in your system. I mean, if you needed to go, you know, if you wanted to do it quarterly, you could do it quarterly. The point, I guess, is that the way that you structure that time has to work for what you need to get out of the system, right? What you put in has to give you what you need to get out. So if you only need an annual financial statement or annual financial analysis, then it might be fine to update your books every quarter. The issue is what happens in July when you have some sort of production crisis and you need to go to the bank and get a line of credit. And they say, well, let's see your income statement. Let's see, you know, how's your business done so far this year? And then all of a sudden it's going to take a lot of time to get caught up, right? So staying on top of things makes it easier when you need to take something out of that system, when you need to draw on it. It's more available to you and has greater value than if you have to scramble and again, take time away from other important tasks to get caught up. So Kristen shared in the chat, QuickBooks Online is almost always on sale. If you go look at the Intuit is the company that produces it. If you go look at Intuit's website and you don't see it on sale, that's atypical. So they always have a lot of good discounts to try to get people hooked, I think, on the product and get people started.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking time today and going through that with everybody. It's very important information.